Welcome to the SJ Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to the SJ Child Show. I'm really excited today to jump into this conversation. I was doing some research and found a wonderful guest to invite on the show, and it is going to be something that our audience is going to find a lot of value in. And I love her website and her pages and things. I've gone and stalked her a little bit. And so thank you, Laura, so much for being here today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I think that my passion has always been children, early childhood education, neuroscience, all of the fun things that combine in what we're going to have a great conversation about today. Give us a little bit of an introduction. Let us know where you've come from, where you're at, and why you're here today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm a child behavior specialist, and I coach parents in emotional regulation. And so the inspiration for the work that I do started with my own personal life and raising my own two deeply feeling kids who struggled with big emotions such as anger and anxiety. And those big emotions would look like meltdowns and misbehavior, sibling rivalry, disrespect and defiance, or with anxious feelings, it would look like worry, avoidance, panic. And so I really was not prepared.
Yeah. Right. There's no handbook for that.
I was not prepared. No, and so, as life tends to do, you learn as you go. And so this inspired my work. This inspired, my certification in, as a child behavior specialist. And then from there, I went on to get trained as an emotion coach and a childhood anxiety coach, and ultimately a parent coach, because my inspiration is to share what I know now that I wish I knew then, so that parents who are struggling don't need to feel alone with it, and children who are struggling don't need to feel shamed or helpless.
Yeah, so important too, because oftentimes now in this era that we're in, we're finding that, parents want to be more emotionally connected with their kids. Not to say that in other generations they weren't, but it was kind of like a seen but not heard in the past. And so we're breaking out of those stigmas and those social norms that had been, and really taking a look at how we can be more connected with our children, how we can create more stability in their lives that we may not have felt in ourselves growing up. I hope that people are trying to do that if they feel that way. But it's so important to also have resources for that, because where do you go? How do you know where to start? What's the typical maybe occurrence that happens that makes you realize, oh, I'm way off track here. Like, how do I get help? What kind of advice do you give to someone who has just, has a defiant teen, doesn't know how to start, kind of in the middle of their process?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to start by acknowledging your first statement, which is that, many of us were raised in homes where we weren't taught how to, manage our emotions and our behavior. And so we may not feel prepared then to help our child. And I actually had a really interesting conversation very recently with my mom, and she actually lives in a small little house on our property. She's retired. She's 82 now.
Mm.
And we have our little coffee talk now and then. And we were having an interesting conversation about sort of acknowledging that, like in my growing up years, the joke, oh, be home by dark, or, we were very independent physically.
Mhm.
We were a hardy bunch. We learned how to take care of ourselves. Nobody was holding our hand too much.
Yeah.
Um, but emotions were not allowed,
Yes.
and so they were either ignored or punished. And so we may have grown up knowing how to take care of ourselves physically, but we really didn't grow up knowing how to take care of ourselves emotionally. And I think in today's generation, I see that parents are beginning to understand the importance of learning how to be emotionally strong, not just physically strong, but emotionally strong. So all that to say, I think the best starting point for learning how to do that is to understand, first of all, the definition of emotional regulation. And my definition of emotional regulation is the ability to be with our emotions as they rise up in us and as they recede, and then to use our logic to become curious about what our emotions are communicating to us about our needs, and then how to respond to those effectively. But the reason that is so challenging is because of our nervous system and how it can unconsciously impact our behavior. And so when we're feeling okay, when we're feeling comfortable emotions, we are emotionally regulated. We are able to work in balance with our emotions and our logic. We're able to act as our best selves, which can look like the ability to listen and be flexible and learn and problem solve, all of these qualities that we want in our children. And when they are feeling okay and when they're emotionally regulated, we can see those behaviors. But what happens is that when we experience uncomfortable emotions, such as overwhelm, stress, anger, worry, embarrassment, our mind does not know the difference between the uncomfortable emotions that we experience when there's danger and the uncomfortable emotions that we can experience in everyday life. And so what happens is that our fight, flight, or freeze response can get activated in response to these uncomfortable emotions that we experience in everyday life. And so instead of being able to act in balance and respond with logic, our automatic and unconscious reaction can be to lash out or to shut down. And so what that can look like in children is it can look like crying, screaming, hitting, kicking, throwing, laughing at us, running away, being disrespectful and defiant. And as parents, because for a lot of us too, emotions, it's challenging to manage our own emotions even as adults. And so what it can look like in ourselves, because when our kids are angry or anxious, it can trigger our own anger and anxiety. And so we can yell or shame, blame, threaten, ignore, ask them to go away, or just generally disconnect from our kids emotionally. And so all of this to create a foundation of compassion, compassion for our children and compassion for ourselves. And, added to that, we've already acknowledged that as adults, emotional regulation is challenging because many of us were not taught emotional regulation. But for our kids, it's even more challenging because they're not born with the capacity to regulate their emotions. They're born with their emotions fully intact, but born with essentially no ability to respond to them effectively. And it's also really important to understand that, emotional regulation, it develops slowly over time, but that can look really different in different kids. And so for some kids, emotional regulation is going to be more challenging and it's going to take longer to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our listeners are neurodiverse families. And so they're very much going to understand that part, especially if they might have siblings that are typical alongside their neurodiverse siblings, that emotional regulation can, like you said, is just so different in each individual child. You know, I love running themes. It's like these conversations that we're having, I've been having for the last week or so now. And so it's so interesting how I don't even plan sometimes my calendar to be booked the way it is. And then I
Mhm.
just have these wonderful conversations back to back. So they can almost kind of like go into one another, and I'm
Yeah.
learning so much. And one thing I've really taken away from the last few days is really the importance of a couple of things. Teaching your children as early as possible the way their brain works. Show them a diagram of the brain. Show them this is the part of the brain that's working, and these are the actions that are taking place during these years or time frames. Not only is it important for the child to know, it's more important for the parent to know, what's happening during those time frames. I love when I was able to look at that several years ago and realize that during these years that the focus I needed to have was not any further expectations than what my child could take at that moment, and I think that knowing what is going on in the brain during those years is so important. And the next thing is when they're so little too, is giving a name to their feelings so that they can start to understand, okay, this is what it looks like. Say, hey, Johnny, you look like you're really frustrated that you can't get that puzzle piece in. How is that making you feel, or where are you feeling that in your body? And I've been learning just a lot about the helping them understand, like you said, those big feelings, but really putting a word and a name to them, because for them it could feel like so many different things. And another, I guess, important part is when they do get older, validating their feelings from a space of separation, not a, oh, I know exactly how you're feeling, because you and I are biologically different. We cannot be feeling the exact same thing. I couldn't even know what a feeling feels like in your body versus what it feels like in my body. And I think
Yeah.
that's important to validate them without putting ourselves and in that position. Oh, I know exactly how you feel. And I think that's so validating to have that process available. Yeah.
Yeah, so many good points that you raise. And I love what you said about learning and teaching about the brain. In many cases, especially when our children are very young, the person who it benefits the most is ourselves as parents, because
Yeah.
again, it creates that compassion and understanding. And that's so important because it's a two-step process. When I work with parents one-on-one, I teach them a three-step plan for how to build their own emotional regulation, and then a three-step plan for how to support the development of emotional regulation in their child. And so it all starts, of course, with ourselves as parents. And if we're not able to stay regulated ourselves, then we're not able to be there to help our child develop their own self-regulation. And so a big part of that is when we can have compassion and understanding that really supports our ability to stay regulated. But I will add to that. I love the ideas about, helping children to learn to tune into their bodies. Where are they feeling their feelings in their body? Especially with young children, helping them identify, names, words to identify those feelings, and validation, all such important things. But I think one of the things that I like to share with parents that I think is the most valuable is that when our kids are in that dysregulated moment, we often go to places like consequences and rewards, or ignoring unwanted behaviors, or even that more sophisticated teaching skills for calming themselves. And yet, it's important to understand that and I learned this the hard way, because when my children were very early on, when my children were younger, I was taught to teach them through consequences and rewards. And that's what I did. And then I thought that I was getting very sophisticated as I was learning more and more, and my kids were getting older. And so then instead I would respond by teaching skills, and I would get frustrated and I would feel worried when that never helped. The next time my kid always still lashed out or shut down. And what I've learned that is helpful, that I think it was helpful to me, and I hope will be helpful to other parents as well, is that until our child actually develops self-regulation, they don't have the ability to, they don't have the ability to remember those tools exist and then to utilize them in that moment, because when they're dysregulated, they're dysregulated. When they have the ability to have awareness that they're dysregulated and consider tools for supporting their regulation, yes, that's when they can start to put this really valuable information that we're teaching them over the years into action. But until we get there, what I think is the most important tool is co-regulation. And what co-regulation is essentially is recognizing our children's behavior as not purposeful behavior in most cases, but in fact, dysregulation, and responding in a way that supports them in returning to regulation. And we'll talk in a moment about how we can do that, because as you alluded to, that can look different in every child. But the reason that co-regulation is the most effective way to support the development of emotional regulation in our children is because short-term, what it helps is it helps our child return to a state of regulation when they don't have the ability to do it on their own. And as we mentioned earlier on, it's when they're in that state of regulation that they're able to act as their best selves. They're able to listen and be flexible and cooperate and learn and problem solve. And so it's beneficial because in the moment, we support our kids in acting as their best selves, but also it's co-regulation that is the most effective way to teach emotional regulation, because it's that embodied learning, that learning through their body and through their feelings, that is the most effective way for them to learn to internalize and conceptualize strategies for calming themselves. So yes, wonderful to read books and educate, but much more important is, it's counterintuitive, really, but neuroscience supports over and over again that the most effective way is embodied learning in terms of being the most effective way to build this in our kids. And then for older kids, if they're interested in learning about the brain and everything, that's great, and it's all good stuff. But I think a lot of times there's some confusion around that's the way we build emotional regulation. And in fact, it's not.
Yeah, that very good point to make too, because it's in practice. I mean, it's not something you can just textbook and, oh, I've done it. And now my kids are going to know what to do too.
Right.
It's so much practice. And I can remember I have a 13-year-old who is, semi-verbal on the autism spectrum. And for many times, during his life, he's had a hard time regulating his emotions. And it was very early on that we would take deep breaths next to him. And that's how I would practice co-regulating with him, was taking deep breaths. And I remember one day, 5 or 6 years into this practice, finding him in his room, sitting on his bed, like, something had happened in Pac-Man, and he was right about to the point where it was gonna be, he was losing it. And I watched him just take deep breaths and calm himself down. And I was just like, bravo, it's brilliant. It's happening. He's finally, and it doesn't happen every single time. This was the one time that it happened. But I know that he took that time and co-regulated himself. Like I kind of stood back so that, he didn't even know that I was there watching it all happen. And it was really nice to see, but it takes so much time, so much practice, so much intention for parents to have, to have this be a part of their daily lives, really make it habits, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's, I love that story, and sometimes you just need that little piece to keep you going and know that what you're doing is having an impact. But I think sometimes what can be most helpful is to just change our definition of success. I think many parents, including myself, would get frustrated and worried because our definition of success was, okay, we teach our kids and then they're able to next time put these tools into practice. I truly believed that. I didn't know differently. And I don't think I'm the only one. I
No.
think a lot of us are, led to
Hmm.
believe that, oh, we teach the skills and then they'll utilize them. And so I think the idea of changing the definition of our success from what I thought it was to a much longer term strategy of like, I can feel like I did my job as a parent, not because my kid is able to regulate themselves, but because I was able to help them regulate.
Hmm.
And that can be the new definition
Yeah.
of success.
Yeah. And it feels so positive and you want to keep going. It really, makes you, and then you see the empowerment that it gives your child when they can do that and go through those things as well. What is the process like for finding you, and if I'm a parent that's looking, how would I go about getting in touch with you to find out about the coaching process?
Yeah, everyone can find me at Laura Reardon coaching.com. That's LauraReardon. And you'll find lots of great information on my website, and also that's where you can sign up for a personalized parenting plan.
Mm.
My passion as a coach is to make personal coaching as accessible as possible for as many people as possible. Most coaching programs are 3 months and $2,000, and I get it. When I was parenting young children, when I was parenting older children, that would not have been accessible to me. And so my passion is to make personalized coaching accessible. So I offer something called a personalized parenting plan, which is an opportunity. We have a one-on-one private session on Zoom, and we create a customized and holistic plan for how to support ourselves as parents and our children in responding to their big emotions with calm and conflict resolution, to build and support the development of emotional regulation. And so that's where people can find me. And also I'd encourage you to follow me on Instagram, because I post often educational content.
Really good too. Like I said, I checked out her page, and
Oh, thank
it's
you.
very helpful, and I love to share those kinds of things. So I may be plucking it and sharing it if that's okay with you every
Oh,
once in a while.
absolutely.
It's always great. There's never a one size fits all. It's a community effort. It's a effort of everyone together, just like I'm sure within your parenting coaching, it's individual with you, but it includes the parents and the child, and it's kind of all inclusive of the people that are involved, right? And so
Yeah, yeah. And that makes me think of something I forgot to mention, which is with the personalized parenting plan, parents get the plan in writing. And they find that so valuable because, as you said, there's so many different people that can care for a child. And it's a really helpful way to
I
share
love
what they're
that.
learning with others.
That's beautiful. And that really is, I think that anecdotal learning from stories and experiences from others, and sharing your successes and your failures. I think it's just as important to share what hasn't worked, as well as what does work. Well, maybe you could share this if anyone ever needs a tip. There's a little thing I did when I first became a parent, and that was I had a previous habit of yelling. And I really realized right off the bat with this little guy who was not verbal yet that that was not a way that I could communicate with him. And I needed to learn really quickly how I could better, understand and help him. I have an older 23-year-old, so we won't go there. But yeah, that's where it all came, that just continuation of what we had and what we learned, and until we know better, right? But there was a time when I finally said, enough is enough. Like, I have to change this. So I told myself and made myself be very disciplined that every time I wanted to yell, I would yell, I want to yell right now. And it
Mhm.
started to sound so ridiculous. And it's so, after so many times, but it was great that it allowed me to understand my triggers, and it allowed me to feel that emotion that I needed to get it out and feel it. But nobody was getting yelled at. Nobody was getting their feelings hurt. My loud voice was being used, but it didn't, I after enough time, it didn't serve me anymore, and I completely got rid of it. Now it's been, like 10, 13 years. So, but it was so great to be able to change something that I didn't know was bad. Well, maybe I did, but you don't know that you're going to do it as a parent and it's not going to be a great thing until you've gone there. And so being able to make that change and to just say, this is more important for my child moving forward. And now it's just, and it's funny too, because it's never anything that happened in my relationship with like my spouse or anything. It was just like a parental thing that like kicked in or something.
Nothing to trigger you like your children.
Isn't that the truth? Right. And bring back all of your own childhood traumas and memories and the
Exactly.
suches. Yeah. So good thing
Yeah.
to try to change those while we can. Anything in the future coming up for you or anything on the horizon?
Well, actually, as you were speaking, it made me think about something I'm in the process of adding to my website, which is a free tool for people to download. And it's a tool called the ABCs for Keeping Calm. And as I said, as part of my personalized parenting plan, I teach a 3-step comprehensive plan for how to support your own regulation. But this is just a quick in the moment tool. And so I don't know when this will air, but when people
Yeah.
visit my website, if it's not available, I wasn't planning to do this, but I'm just going to do this. If it's not yet available, which it might be, go ahead and email me at laura@laurareardoncoaching.com and just request the ABC tool. And I will just send you a private copy before it goes public, just because I just can't help but want to share this with
Oh,
our
I love
conversation and how it's
that.
going. So yeah,
Thank
that's what I'm
you.
working on right now.
Wonderful. I love that. I think that finding all of these resources for parents and being able to share them in hopes that we can bring some, peace and value and compassion into the lives of not only the parents, but especially the children. And they're the kind of end all that get, from what comes out of us. And so we need to make sure that it's as good as we can make it so that we can give them the best that they deserve. Yeah, it was so great to have you on today and learn more about you. And I hope we can catch up and do it again another time.
I really enjoyed being here and getting to connect with you
Mm.
and your listeners. And I would happily come back and join
Yay.
you again anytime.
Woohoo, wonderful. Well, thank you so, so much for listening today. Everyone, go out there, be kind, be compassionate, and we'll see you soon.